Let's do a little bit of Old Testament history. The Israelites went to Egypt because there was a famine in the land. And Egypt was the place where they could get some grain. They became so comfortable that they stayed in Egypt for a long period of time, for hundreds of years. And in the last part of their journey in Egypt, they became slaves. Now, as slaves, what was their chief occupation? What did they do? They made bricks. Okay? When they made bricks, what did they do? With mud and straw. Okay, if you had to make bricks with mud and straw and get your own mud and straw, and no matter how many bricks you made, you had to make more the next day, what would you do? Complain. So they were murmuring, God, get us out of this mess. And he did. He raised up Moses. Moses led them through the Exodus. And where we are in our scripture passage in our study now, the 5th chapter of Exodus takes place, or the 5th chapter of Numbers takes place in the Exodus experience. One thing about the Israelites, they haven't changed. They're not making bricks anymore, but they're still murmuring. You know, if you're going to murmur, you'll always find something to murmur about. It can be a sunshiny day, it can be a rainy day, that doesn't matter. It can be 14 below zero, or it can be a perfect balmy 80 degrees, and you're going to find something wrong. When that happens to believers, when we begin to murmur, it transforms who we are in a negative way. We begin to see the beauty, the purpose, the direction that God is leading us. The Israelites complained because they had nothing to eat. And then God sent them food, and they complained because of what they had to eat. They complained because they were lost in the desert. God gave them leaders, and they complained about how the leaders were leading them. They had never seen God. They'd just been surrounded by His miracles and His blessings. But they began to complain because they wanted a God they could see, one that they could touch with their hands and pick up and move wherever they wanted to move Him. They wanted a convenient God, and so they built one. And all of this happens by mile marker 225 of their journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. And what happens is this holy people of God, they begin to unravel. Their families, their oneness, their holiness. God gave them the 10 Commandments. At the same time, they were wanting a tangible God. He was putting Himself into expression, a form that they could hear and live their lives by. The 10 Commandments are not a set of 10 rules. They are the guidelines for a relationship with God and with other people. It's all about that. And so for a brief moment they were okay, but they soon returned to their old nature, and they began to murmur more. They murmured against each other. They complained about their spouses. They complained again about being thirsty. You're in a desert. I mean, what do you expect to be? They reached this place where Moses just couldn't stand it anymore. God said, it's okay, brother, hang on. Don't lose your holiness. Just speak to the rock, and it will gush forth water, and their needs will be met. But you know what? Moses' holiness had already begun to unravel. He took his rod, he struck the rock after saying to the people, "You bunch of rebels." And then he said the most horrendous thing, "We will bring water from the rock." Now, I got news for you. Moses had absolutely nothing to do with bringing that water from the rock. That was God's doing. Moses was just the instrument. And to demonstrate that God could do it, he just said to Moses, "Speak to the rock and it will bring forth water." But Moses wanted to demonstrate his power. He wanted the attention. He struck the rock and said, "Now are you happy?" And so it was that at mile marker 400, his holiness unraveled. Will you make it through Monday? Will you get through your work week? Will you get through the freedom of Friday night, party night, TGIF, being able to do anything you want to for next weekend or tomorrow since you have the day off? Will you get by if somebody is here that you really don't like and you're wondering why they're in church? You know, we're on a journey. Somewhere in this life, you left behind your Egypt. And we're not at the promised land. We have a long, hard way to go. And you know, we're not going to make it if we don't follow God. I'm not saying, and I do not believe, that a person can lose their salvation. But I do believe that we can lose that joy, that happiness of being God's people. So today's sermon is a reminder that we need to work to keep our holiness. And how do you do that? As Moses looks at his people, he realizes that he's got to start on a level where they are, a low level where they can understand. So he begins with what I call an artificial sign of sin. Because that's really what murmuring is all about. You say, "No, I murmur, preacher, because I see people who are doing things wrong." No, you murmur because you do not have faith. If you have faith, you will believe that God will handle the wrong. Now, I'm preaching to me too. I can distinctly remember making a comment to my wife this morning about another situation. And I was murmuring. And God said, "See, Bill, that's how your holiness unravels." Look at verse 1 of Numbers 5. Moses is giving the people specific directions how they can deal with those who might infect others. The Lord said to Moses, "Command the Israelites to send away from the camp anyone who has an infectious disease, skin disease, or a discharge of any kind, or who is ceremonially unclean because of a dead body. Send away male and female alike. Send them outside the camp so they will not defile the camp where I dwell among them. The Israelites did this, the Scripture says. They did just as the Lord had instructed. Now, God had reasons for sending some of the people outside the camp. The reasons were both physical and spiritual. In other words, God was saying, when you encounter on your spiritual journey those who are murmuring, isolate them.